everyone, and welcome back to my podcast. I am Ayla Al Saka, a journalism student at Nottingham College. In today's episode, I am joined by someone who has an incredible background. She's worked in media across the Middle East and in conflict zones, supporting journalists and helping them stay safe while reporting. Before we get into her experiences, could you please introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about what you do?
Yeah, hi. My name's Karina. I was previously in the British military for 14 years. I've served across multiple operational and conflict zones. I left in 2017 and I pursued a career still within a safety and security aspect of life. And I worked throughout Africa for 2.5 years, doing counter poaching illegal wildlife trade operations. And then that developed into doing safety and security for media outlets across, again, majority of it being conflict zones.
So, you have worked closely with journalists in places like Lebanon, Syria, and Ukraine. Could you describe what your role actually involves on a day-to-day basis?
Yeah, it's pretty diverse actually. So it just depends on what's happening. A lot of my work is actually behind the scenes conducting risk assessments. So I analyze multiple open source to work out what's going on the ground and identify any risks that could be pertinent to journalists that are going to that area, or if we've got planned trips going to that area. I'm expected to be able to put risk mitigations in place so that we are able to go on that task and try and reduce the level of risk to the journalists on the ground at the time, and also react accordingly should anything untowards happen. So, a lot of my work is planning and preparation. I'm also a qualified medic, so I provide all the medical assistance to the teams on the ground. And I also conduct upskilling and training for the journalists as well in medical, in information gathering, and also if they have any questions with regards to logistics, how we're going to get there. I sort everything out. So I pretty much take care of all aspects of their travel plans, their journey management, cyber security as well. I tell them when they can use their phones, when they shouldn't use their phones. So it's quite an open task of looking after them and trying to take into consideration every aspect of safety to ensure that they achieve their editorial needs.
That's really interesting. Um, how do you prepare journalists before taking them to dangerous or unpredictable environments?
Yeah, that's a good question. So, a lot of the journalists I work with are seasoned. They've done a lot of reporting in conflict zones. Um, so they're very aware of the threats that are posed in different countries that we go to. So what happens prior to going, we'll sit down all together and we'll discuss how we're going to get from A to B. We'll also discuss if we're going to stop off on the way. So we literally go through my planning and preparation and my risk assessment with them. When I'm actually on the ground with them, I will first assess, so I don't let them run off anywhere. I'll first assess what's going on. If we're in a kinetic environment, and by kinetic, I mean if there's artillery rounds coming or there's drones that are dropping a payload or anything like that, then obviously I'll assess it. I can work out distances quite well as well. And then if needs be, we can find hard cover. So they take my direction on the ground and they'll always listen to what I'm saying to them in order to protect them, to be able to gain the story that they need, but in the safest way possible. So a lot of it is very interpersonal, soft skills, listening, communication, effective communication. But at the same time, you also need to be able to understand what it is exactly they want to achieve while they're on the ground. If I know that from the very beginning, then I'm able to produce a risk mitigation strategy in place to be able to achieve that for them. So it's a very two-way process.
You mentioned coming from a long military background. How does that experience help you now when you are supporting media teams?
Significantly. Absolutely. I couldn't do what I do now if it hadn't have been for my military career. I was very fortunate when I joined that I served multiple deployments in Iraq, in Afghanistan, in East Africa, in Northern Ireland, and all of these locations were very kinetic. Um, and that translates to the areas that I go to now. So a lot of my experience and my knowledge and skills have come from my military background that have enabled me to do this kind of work, and which also highlights me to the media agencies to be able to do this work. I think also another interesting point to note is actually there's not very many women that do this. So we're few and far between in a very male dominated environment. Um, so when they find out about my background and my history of what I used to do in the military as well, combined with all the other continued professional development that I've done since leaving the military, whether it's academic or whether it's hands-on approach with my medical qualifications, it all goes hand in hand and it's all interconnected to be able to do what I do now.
It's very inspiring that there's no a lot of women doing this and you are just doing it. This is so inspiring.
Yeah, it's a very interesting world to get into. I'm happy that someone took a chance on me and realized my background and was like, "Hey, would you like to try this?" And I was like, "Absolutely." And it was actually a very good friend of mine, another female friend of mine, who recommended me for it. So right now, like I say, there's a small number of us females that do this kind of work. So it's rewarding in that sense.
What are the biggest challenges when working with the news organizations like Reuters in conflict areas?
Yeah. So um, a lot of it is personality driven. So you, like I say before, you've got to understand exactly how the journalists operate, what they want to achieve editorially. So whether that is the story in general or whether you've got a photographer or a videographer, you need to understand exactly how, where they want to be, what they want to shoot, how they want to shoot it, because everything is different angles if you're going to take video, if you're going to take pictures. So you need to have an understanding of the journalist themselves, what their experience is and their background, but also what they want to achieve individually on the ground. Okay. And then sometimes you will come up against seasoned journalists that have a lot of experience and want to do it their way. And that can pose problems, especially if you're in a kinetic environment. But generally speaking, I'll be honest, because of the knowledge, skills, and experience that a safety advisor brings to the party, a lot of journalists will actually listen. And it, like I say to you before, it's a two-way environment. So if you can have good interpersonal skills and you can communicate effectively, generally speaking, journalists are very receptive and it's vice versa. I respect them, they respect me, and we'll try and come to a common ground to achieve what they need to achieve.
Um, how do you think being in such high risk environments affects how journalists tell stories or the kind of stories that reach the public?
That's a difficult question for me. So I think the journalists that I work with, all of them want to try and get the truth across, exactly what's happening on the ground at the time. Um, I'm not going to get into the whole, this is what this news agency wants to report because they're left or right, whatever they are in politics. But I know from the journalists that I work with, they're passionate about what they do and they want to report the truth and they want to show you exactly what's going on because there is actually a lot that you don't, that the public don't actually see, and they can't actually feel. So when photographers go out, they want to take the picture that incites the feelings that you can feel there and then. For video, they want to show you exactly what's going on. When it's in high conflict zones, it can be very stressful and not just the mental, but the emotional strain as well. So I think the journalists that I know of, given their passion, sometimes they'll want to achieve that task so badly because they want to show the world exactly what's going on. But at the same time, it can be dangerous. And it can have an adverse impact on them mentally, physically, emotionally. But that's another reason why you have a safety advisor on the ground with them. I'm also trained as a mental health first aider. So part of my role is to actually monitor their well-being emotionally and mentally. And if there is any issues, then obviously I can talk to them or I can raise it to my chain of command just to say that I'm concerned. So yeah, it does have it can be very impactful, especially if you're in a kinetic environment for a long period of time.
Okay, so finally, what advice would you give to young journalists or students who might one day report from risky areas or cover sensitive international stories?
Oh, very good question. Um, I would recommend one of the biggest things to understand would be the medical side of life, and also the cyber, especially with mobile phones and the way that warfare is now being fought as well. And a classic example of this is Israel, Ukraine, and how they're doing targeted operations utilizing drones or mobile phone technology. Um, a lot of journalists that I work with, they do what's known as heat courses, so hostile environment and awareness training. Now, these are generally put on by the corporations or the agencies that they work for, or they're also provided by CPJ or other organizations, NGOs. So I would highly recommend any journalist to get onto a heat course or a hostile environment awareness course. Medical qualifications would be fantastic, even though you cover it on those heat courses. And also an understanding of cyber awareness. I think those are the three key things I can think of from my experience right now. I think the other thing is just to maintain that passion. It's the one thing that I love working with journalists is their passion for reporting what they want to report and coming up with some amazing stories that they want to tell as well to the world and show. So yeah, that would be my recommendation to anybody who wants to do it and try and get as volunteer work with agencies and different agencies with what you want to achieve. Um, all the agencies offer a different way of working, a different method. So you've got to find what works for you and what you're passionate about that you feel you would offer to an agency. That's what I would say from my experience.
So that brings us to the end of this episode. A huge thank you to my guests for sharing her amazing experiences and giving us a look into a side of journalism that often goes unseen. The people who makes it possible for reporters to tell stories safely from dangerous places. I have learned so much about how different roles in the media connect, especially in challenging environments. Thank you for listening, and I am Ayla Al Saka, and this has been my podcast for What Do You Do project at Nottingham College.